Auzubillahi minash-shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the final lecture of CLD's December lecture series. CLD was founded by Shaykaah Shafalia in 2019 and it's been declared as Waqf, which means that every course that we offer is for free and inshallah sadaqah jariyah. Our courses are available on our website. We also have weekly classes, short courses, occasional lectures, and webinars as well. Shaykaah has been studying Islam for over 17 years, and she's very passionate about using her intensive knowledge and experiences to educate people across the globe without them going through the difficulties and hardship she had to face during her learning journey. Shaykaah has taken time from her busy schedule to arrange these lectures, especially for those people who find difficult to commit to weekly lessons. So inshallah, they can make full use of these short lectures and get all the information that they need. And today's topic is Fiqh of Menstruation, a very important topic for sisters, inshallah. And Shaykaah will use authentic knowledge from Quran and Hadith and give her all the information so we can improve ourselves as well and help others, inshallah. Before handing over to Shaykaah, I'll quickly go over some housekeeping rules. Please keep your mic on mute at all times. There are CLD members available in the chat. If you have any technical issues or any difficulties, you can message us, inshallah. Please write your questions in the chat box when the question and answer session is open, or you can also raise your hand and inshallah we'll let you ask your questions. We will have a salah break around 3:50, inshallah. I'll hand it over to Shaykaah now.
قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So glad her sister joining me today for Fiqh of Menstruation. As Sister Aisha already has said, that this is going to be the last lecture I'll run for these holidays. So today's lecture is a quite important one, Fiqh of Menstruation, and it is important and something that I really wanted to run again. I've run it a few times in the past, simply because I think there's still a lot of confusion concerning regular and irregular bleeding. When should you stop praying? When should you, commence your prayers? When should you, give up your fasting? And I think what I've found is a lot of sisters are missing their fasts and their salahs, without valid reasons, because they are confused, simply because they're confused. So inshallah today, what we're going to do is remove some of that confusion, inshallah give you some clarity on istiada and on menstruation haid. Okay. So the course outlines, inshallah, what we're going to do. Sorry, I don't know if you can still see my screen. Right. Course outlines: what is menstruation? What is istiada? How long should it last according to Quran Sunnah? And then we will start looking at the four madahibs. We're going to go and look at some of the hadiths concerning the two cases. What are the signs for its ending? Prohibited acts during menstruation. And then finally your ghusl, which is the purification. And then we'll go straight on to the answer and question, inshallah. Right. Haid, the Arabic word haid is the word used for menstruation, which means of flowing, so flowing of blood. The uterus, istiada, is irregular vaginal bleeding, okay, and it comes from a vein called al-adl. What we're going to do is look at the sunnah, and so we want to draw some clarity from the reports of the four madahibs and investigate which ones have been the closest to the report. So we're going to talk about the duration first, inshallah. If we look at the duration according to Hanfi, the minimum bleeding obviously for them is 3 days, and anything that is less than that would be irregular bleeding. So they have put the days of minimum bleeding 3 days, and then the maximum would go on to 10. Obviously these notes are for you to refer back to, and we will make them, it is already available on the website, so inshallah you can download them and keep them. So this is inshallah, I put in every detail for you so you can refer back to them. I won't be reading every single thing. I'll just give you a short summarization. So if we go on to Hanbali's fiqh, we can say the minimum time of minutes a day and a night. So for them, it's basically a bit like Shafalia opinion. I'll come to that again. So the day and night is what's minimum, and then this goes on to 15 days as maximum days. The Mosque bleeding is basically you spurt a spurt of a blood, and with this it's not complicated, but there's a lot of technical issues here. So what they say, as soon as you say a spurt of blood, so one gush of blood is enough for you to be classified as somebody who is menstruating. And what they say is, if you are menstruating, say for 5 days, you add on the 3 additional days, and you could go up to 15 days. So that's the maximum. So if you have menstruated for 5 days, you can add 3 days. If you have menstruated for your cycle, your normal cycle is 13 to 14 days, then you would just add the 2 days if your cycle's 13, and if your cycle is 14, you would just add 1 more day. You would not go beyond the 15 days. So that's what they say. So whatever your cycle is, you could go up to, you can add 3 days. Okay, so if it's if your normal cycle is 5 days, you add on 3 days. And same with the 8, 9, 10 going on. And then once you get to 13, then you don't obviously add 3 days. You only add the days that make it complete 15 days. I hope that's clear. It is a little bit of technicalities there. Do refer back to if you need to. So the Shafis are basically 24 hours. You bleed in 24 hours, and that's enough for you to be menstruating. However, any bleeding that's less than that would not be considered as your menstruation. So that's the 24 hours is a must. And again, for them, the maximum days are 15. So 15 is the majority are with thoughts of schools. What we're going to do is look at the 3 cases between the just bear with me, sorry, I'm just going to try and get my laser light, which I haven't done. So let's see, there we go. Right, okay, so I could give you some pointers. So you have 3 cases. You're distinguishing between istiada and haid. So the first one is based on your stable monthly cycle. So this is basically your dates. Okay, so some people are quite regular. Every month they are sort of around the same date. Okay, or they start bang on that date that they're supposed to be menstruating. So this woman, this category of women who start on a certain date, it's easy for them to distinguish between irregular bleeding and non-irregular bleeding. So their regular bleeding and irregular bleeding, they can distinguish between that, which is haid and isti'adha. Don't forget, haid is your menstruation, and isti'adha is your irregular bleeding. So the hadith tells us to stay away from prayer and fasting during the time that we experience menstrual blood. That's your first case. So your first case is based on your regular date. Okay, so the date that you regularly menstruate, and it's easy for you to distinguish because you start every month bang on time, or around about the time that you are supposed to menstruate. Now the second case is of somebody who has to distinguish between the blood, because the date is not clear. So what they have to do, they have to in turn look at the actual blood. You can distinguish the blood between its characteristics. We know the menstruation blood is malodorous, is thick, and is dark. So malodorous basically means it has an odor to it. It is a lot more thicker and it's a lot more darker. Whereas the isti'adha blood, it tends to be more red. It's not so thick and it's not malodorous. So it doesn't have that odor, the strong odor that you would find in menstrual blood. So that is one of the distinguishers. So the first one is date. The second one is the actual characteristics. It's really important to understand from the cases that I've heard, a lot of women are still confused between the characteristics of blood. If you are confused, then we could deal with that in the question and answer session. But a lot of the time, the blood, which is the menstrual blood, it doesn't flow as quick or as much as the isti'adha blood does. It doesn't gush out as quick. So what I would say is, inshallah, if you are confused, just ask me at the end, and inshallah I'll go through that. So when the menstruation blood comes, it is black. So in the hadith, it describes the characteristics now of the blood. So the first hadith that we looked at, if we just quickly go back here, it says, remain away from prayer, okay, when your menstrual period comes, and it prevents you from praying. So here it's talking really about the date. Here now it actually specifies the type of blood. So in this hadith, we come to realize that the menstrual blood is black. It can be recognized, and you need to give up your performing of salah when you see this type of blood. So going on to the third. So the first one is date, second one is characteristics of blood. Now the third one here is your confused one. It's perplexed case, where you are not certain about how to distinguish between a stable cycle from a non-stable. So from your irregular to your regular bleeding, you don't know anymore. So this is people that are suffering from PCOS, people that really don't have no idea about the characteristics of blood, and they don't have a regular date anymore. If you are those people, and if you are the women that fall into this third category, what you need to be doing is following the prevalent womanly menstrual period cycle. So what you need to do is see what is common, okay, within society amongst the women. What is the common number of days of cycle, and follow that, which is usually between 6 to 7 days. Okay, so they deem the 7 days as normal, as a time for your period. So if you do see blood, just count to 7 days and you can continue to pray. Now we're going to go to the hadith that describes that. It says to us, istiada is a strike, it's a harm from shaitan. So when it does come, count 6 or 7 days of menstruation, then you should take your ritual bath, which means to purify yourself, and then you continue praying up until between 24 to 23 days. And then if you see any blood after that, then you can take that as menstruation. So this is really a confused case that really doesn't know when to start, or when to start praying, when to give up. So here it says, when you do see the blood, take your 7 days. If you continue to bleed after the 7 days, you ignore that. You continue to pray for 23 to 24 days, which is a normal cycle that's mentioned in the hadith. And then what you do after those days, if you're still continuing to bleed, then after those days are up, you take the 7 days additional for menstruation, stop praying, and then continue. This is for somebody who's regularly bleeding, okay, non-stop, or somebody who is confused, inshallah. Menstrual cycles on average are 28 days. Okay, so a normal cycle may be between 21 to 35 days. So it does cover the points mentioned in the hadith. So this is something that has come from the normal medical perspective, which is what they tell us. But it is in menstrual cycle on average is 28 days, but it can vary between 21 to 35 days. And that does coincide with the hadith that we've just mentioned. So just to recap on the 3 types of cycles. So as I said, the first one is based on a stable menstrual cycle, which is your date. The second case is based on your characteristics of blood, which you distinguish between the odor, the color of the blood, and we said that the thickness. Okay, so the thickness of the blood. Okay, so that's your 3 characteristics that you need to bear in mind when you are trying to distinguish between the 2 types of blood, inshallah. The third case is based around the prevalent case, so which is what normal women's cycles are. So if you are a perplexed case, then you need to follow what is generally accepted amongst the women in the society. So when does menstruation end? So now what we've done, we've just covered 3 cases of menstruation. Now what we're going to do is go on to discuss exactly when your menstruation should end. So Aisha says in a hadith, don't be hurried in finishing your menstruation. And what the women would send in their sort of cotton pads to Aisha, for her to then just let them know if they had finished their menstruation or not, and she would check them, and she would advise them accordingly. Okay, so when does menstruation really end? So you should either see complete dryness, so you don't see any sort of blood and there's no discharge, or what you may see is white on your cotton pad. So what would happen, so on your in your essential towel, what you would see is some of that white thick or whitish kind of discharge, and that's an indication that you have now ended your menstruation period. Imam Malik says it's a white liquid, and then Abu Hanifa just talks about it as being the pure white. Seizing of blood. So in Imam Shafi's opinion, it says, and it's the same for all. So as long as you've seized your blood, and any yellow or dusky substance, so anything like that, you should obviously finish off completely. This is why Aisha said, do not be hasty. And then obviously I'll come back to this hadith once I've just finished speaking about imams. And then the blood stops, as mentioned in Hanbali school of thought. So as soon as the blood stops, but any of those cases are accepted. So if the blood stops, as mentioned in Hanbali and in Shafi opinion, so as long as the blood stops and you don't see any other sort of colors like your yellow or brown colors, and then if it is pure white, as mentioned by Hanafi and Imam Malik, so any of these, so dryness, white, or blood stopping, these three are your indicators that your menstruation has come to an end. Now, the reason why Imam Shafi mentions a yellow or dusky substance is because based on this hadith. Matia, she said that we never considered yellowish discharge as a thing of importance during a non-menstruating period. So basically, if you see any type of discharge, so if it is yellowish or if it's brownish, outside of your menstruation, you don't take it into consideration. You ignore that and you continue praying. However, if those colours come in or follow your period, your normal menstruation, then you would need to wait till that ceases, till you stop seeing those colors, and then you would become pure, just as it says in Imam Shafi's opinion. So outside of your menstruation, your normal menstruation, if you see colors like yellow or brown, then you do ignore them. But if it is part of your menstrual cycle, or once you start finishing off, you see some of that brown at the end, just make sure that disappears before you resume your prayer. Obviously, if you are somebody who's a perplexed case where your bleeding does continue, inshallah, we will continue to speak about that. So now we'll go on to the purification. We'll talk about the different imams. One of the things I do want to mention here is we've talked about the length of the menstrual cycle, so the duration between the Hanbali, the Maliki and Shafi. But just to mention quickly here, there is no clear evidence of the minimum and maximum days of menstruation found in Quran and Sunnah. Okay, so this is something that the Imams have tried to bring together, but it is easy for women to follow. But there is nothing in the Hadith that says that a minimum cycle should be or maximum cycle should be of that. Okay, so we go on to the Hawd, which is the purification. Purification period in Hanafi is 15 days. A maximum is there isn't a maximum duration. So as long as you are pure for 15 days. So if you are somebody who's irregularly bleeding, so they've put down as long as you continue praying 15 days, and then after 15 days you continue praying, which is quite different to what the Hadith was saying, because you continue to pray for at least 23 to 24 days. According to Shafi, okay, the minimum period of tahur is 15 days, and there isn't a maximum date for that. So you should be at least pure for 15 days. Again, 15 days for Maliki, and for Hanbali it is 13 days. Okay, and again, no maximum period of what should be the stage of purification. So purification could be any length, but the minimum should be 15. So if you see any blood, so say you've finished your menstruation and you see some blood after that, after seeing the pure white substance, after complete dryness, or your blood has ceased, and if you fulfilled these three characteristics or these three cases, then what if you did bleed after that, then if it was within the period of 15 days, you would ignore that. Okay, but say you saw some blood after 15 days, according to these three opinions, the Hanafi, Shafi and Maliki, you would take that as your period, except for Hanbali, who says it would be 13 days. But again, the Hadith doesn't specify 15 days, it actually says 21. Fiqh Sunnah states the scholars agree there is no minimum or maximum time limit between the two menstrual cycles. So they put it down as a 15, as a majority of them put it, the maximum period as 15, while others say 3 days. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, inshallah, speak about how to purify yourself for prayer when in the state of istihada. So if you are somebody who's suffering from irregular bleeding, then how do you purify yourself? So just a quick discussion about what we've just said, because I know there's a lot to take in. So the first half, what we did was discuss the types of blood, the 3 types of case for menstruation, if you are confused what to do, and if you don't have a regular cycle, then you will go and distinguish your characteristics of blood. Now we're talking about the stage of purification. So if you are confused and you don't know when to expect your next period, we said in the hadith that it says between 24 days. Medically, we know from medical professionals, it is your normal cycle is 28 days, but it can range from 21 to 35 days. And then we just looked at some opinions of the 4 scholars, and they say that a maximum of 15 days should be the duration of purification between 2 menstrual cycles. And again, as I said, there's nothing of that being mentioned in the hadith. So I hope that's all clear. If not, you can ask me in the question answer session. All right. So we're going to go now how to purify yourself. So in this hadith, we're talking about Habiba bint Jash. She came to the Prophet and she said, in the istihada, I have istihada, I'm suffering from istihada. And she was told by the Prophet that this is a vein, so perform ghusl and pray. So they used to perform ghusl at every prayer. Now, before you start getting alarmed, the ghusl here really refers to your wudu. But and if it's an optional if you wanted to do that, but it was not something that was commanded by the Prophet. Okay, so Habiba did used to perform ghusl, but it's something that she chose to do. Sahih Muslim. But by way of mentioning ghusl, what they did include was wudu as well. So they didn't actually mean the full ghusl, the full washing. It does mean the full your wudu, starting from istinja, which means basically washing your private parts with every salah. Like I said, that's what you need to be doing. So here just reiterating that you don't need to make ghusl for every prayer, making ablution with every prayer, and that's it coincides with all the 4 imams. So washing of the vagina before making the ablution. So that's something. And if your blood is still continuing to flow after even after having washed it, if it still continues to flow, then you need to put in a cotton bud in order to absorb some of that blood, inshallah. Okay, so what can we do during menstruation? So what acts are prohibited, what acts are permissible? So what we've done so far is just talked about menstruation. Now in istihada, now we're going to talk about what can you do and what can you not do. So not touching the Quran based on the ayah of Al-Waqiyah. Okay, la yasmahu illa mutahharun. So none touch it, mutahharun, none touch it except the purified, mutahharun. So the Arabic word here, mutahhar, okay, or mutahharun, it means those that are naturally pure. Okay, so here the adjective is that naturally pure. It refers to those that are angels. It doesn't really refer to people, and this is a confusion. So whenever this verse is read, automatically it appears or it's interpreted as that if you have no wudu, you cannot touch the Quran, or if you're in a state of uncleanliness, you cannot touch the Quran. That is based on the understanding of some, but the actual Arabic word does not refer to the humans, the people. It actually refers to the angels. So it's stated in the Fiqh Sunnah in support of this ayah. It is contained in scrolls, highly honored, most exalted and purified, borne by hands of scribes, non and purified. So it's really talking about the angels, and this actually specifies that because it is contained in scrolls, highly honored, most exalted and purified. Okay, they are in the hands of the scribes that are noble and purified. So mutahhar, those here, the mutahhir, are those who purify themselves. So this one is mutahhar. Okay, mutahhar and mutahhir. So here we have here the al-fa'aliyah. So we have here the ta, which means that this is now those people that ask for purity, and this is one of the words that we find in a dua after we do wudu. So let's not get confused. Let's just go back. So here, what I've taken the root word here is that mutahhar, which means naturally pure. Here is mutatahhir. So if you listen closely, there is a difference. You have mutatahhir and mutahhar. So there's no ta here and there's a ta here. Okay, so if you listen to ta, and then there should be a ta, but in this one there's a ta before the ta, and there is no ta before the ta here. So this refers to the angels, and this refers to us when we ask for being purified after wudu. And if I look at it together, so here you've got the surah here, and here you've got the dua. So if I make just emphasize it again, because it can get a little bit confusing. So here you have mutatahhirin, and here you have mutatahhar, mutatahhar. Again here, so this refers to the angels. في صحف مكرمة مرفوعة مطهرة. And here, okay, we have min al mutahharin, those who purify themselves, who, oh Allah, make me of the repenters and make me of the purified. You're asking Allah to make you to purify you. You're asking Allah to purify you. Here, they are not asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify them, because they are already purified, and there is a difference in the writing of the two. So those who say that this refers to us not touching the Quran when we are menstruating, this is not true. It is actually referring to the angels and not humans. And if the argument is, if it was, then we need to look at or examine the actual wording in Arabic that has been used in the dua after wudu. We are using the word mutatahhirin, and there is that fa'liya in it. Inshallah, I do hope that makes is more clarified now by seeing the actual physical evidence of the two wordings. So in that case, the opinion is that women can touch the Quran while they're menstruating, but this is a minority opinion. So again, there is evidence that women can touch the Quran whilst menstruating, but it is a minority opinion. So let's go and see what the fuqaha have said about this. Malki's opinion is that you cannot touch the Quran except if you are a teacher or a student and you are studying for academic purposes. You are, under the Malki opinion, able to touch the Quran. Some scholars have agreed that you can touch it with a cover. That is basically Abu Hanifa and Ibn Hanbal, who say that, but it is in minor impurity. Sorry. So if it is a minor impurity, for example, minor impurity is that your wudu has broken, you've passed wind, but you're not in a major impurity, which is your menstruation and janaba. Okay, so that's your two cases of major impurities. Shafi did not allow it to be touched in the state of impurity. Sorry. So number two, praying. Okay, so here we've just looked at the cases of the scholars that said you cannot touch them. Okay, so you have here the opinions of Malki, you cannot touch, opinions of Ibn Hanbal and Abu Hanifa, you cannot touch it in major purity. Okay, but in minor impurity, sorry, major impurity, and in minor impurity you cannot touch it unless you do have a cover to touch the Quran. And then Shafi says that you cannot touch it in a state of impurity. So the four Imams have prohibited in a major impurity, which does include menstruation, and none of them do agree that you can touch it. However, there is a minority opinion, which is opinion. Okay, so praying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept prayer without purification. Prophet ﷺ deemed the prayer and fasting of a menstruating valid. Interestingly enough, he did not mention the recitation of Quran. Okay, and let's not forget those. At the moment, I'm teaching my madrasa usul al-Quran, and one of the things that we're going through is how the Quran was revealed, and it was, it was verbal, it came down, and it was memorized. Okay, and parts of it was written, it was only collected at the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, okay? So it was never supposed to be in a form of, well, no, it wasn't revealed in the form of a book, it was revealed verbally. So it was something that was memorized. So, it's not something that you were prohibited from touching. And interestingly enough, it's not been mentioned here. I will come back to that. There is a hadith that is quoted that says that you cannot touch it without wudu. I'll come back to that. Imam Malik mentions that you cannot, itikaf as well. So he doesn't, what can you not do? Okay, so the acts that you cannot do, you're prohibited of in sexual intimacy, and it's based on keeping away from wives during menstruation. Imam Malik mentions itikaf, but again, it's the act of ibadah, and we know from the hadith that women were ordered to stay away. So even though Imam Malik specifically mentions it in his Risala, the other scholars may not mention it, but it does come under the acts of ibadah. Okay, so it comes under the acts of prayer. According to Abu Hanifa, if a woman stops bleeding before her usual monthly course, she does have to take a bath, but in his opinion, she's not allowed to be sexually active until her normal duration is over. So, for example, a woman normally menstruates for 7 days, but suddenly one day she experiences that her blood ceases from after the 5th day. So she's menstruated on one cycle for 5 days, but her normal standard cycle is 7 days. So what Abu Hanifa says, if she has stopped after the 5 days, she can take a bath and become pure, but she cannot be sexually active until her normal days of cycle are also included. And that's basically just to practice caution. Okay, so in case there is in her vagina, so then not to making sure that they are not sexually active in that time. So just again, if a woman is normal cycle 7 days and she wants or experiences her menstruation has ceased or finished earlier than the 7 days, is finished earlier, she can become pure, but she cannot be sexually active until she completes all her 7 days, which is based on her normal cycle. Again, reciting of the Quran, we've said that scholars have disagreed whether this is now reciting. So before what we talked about is touching. So reciting the Quran, okay, not preventing the Prophet ﷺ from reading the Quran except in the state of janaba, which is sexual impurity, a major impurity. It's mentioned in the Midi. This is also the opinion of Imam Shafi, that basically the Quran cannot be recited, okay, and especially in a state of major impurity. So the analogy has been made that if the Prophet ﷺ didn't want to touch the Quran in janaba, which is sexual impurity, then that should include menses as well. So again, as I said, there's no hadith on prohibiting women from touching the Quran in their menstruation. But what's happened is they used an analogy. They've made a qiyas here. They've said because nothing prevented the Prophet ﷺ from touching the Quran except that he was in major purity. So if that's the case, then it should extend to menstruation. However, what scholars say that janaba, your sexual impurity, can be removed, but menstruation cannot be removed. And also this was a preference of the Prophet ﷺ. He did not like to touch it while he was in major impurity. And scholars say that you can touch the Quran even if you don't have wudu in minor impurity. The Prophet ﷺ didn't like to. He liked to stay in a purified state. So that's why just based on his preference, it may be that it's under the category of it being a sunnah. And what scholars say, janaba can be removed, but menses cannot be removed. Okay, and we have to wait till the end. So are you expecting women not to read for the 7 or 8 days that they are menstruating? Again, there is no clear Sahih hadith prohibiting menstruating women to recite the Quran. So here again, as I mentioned, it's talking about recitation. Those who agree that the women can read the Quran, okay, Al-Bukhari, Ibn Abbas, Al-Tabrani, Daud, and Ibn Hazim, taken from Fiqh Sunnah. So Ibn Taymiyyah says as well that there's no clear text prohibiting women from reading the Quran. So again, reciting the Quran is not prohibited. It's just that there's a quite large amount of disagreement on touching it. Okay, so performing tawaf, we've obviously said that falls in the categories of ibadah. So tawaf is considered a prayer, okay, and it has been referred as prayer. So it says that you are unlawful to perform that, and it has been stated, or one of the hadiths that have been used to prove that is, do not approach prayer while you're intoxicated until you are aware of what you are saying, or in a state of janaba. Okay, so that is one of the ayahs of the Quran, and as I said, tawaf is considered prayer, as mentioned in the Tirmidhi. The Prophet ﷺ did say, do everything that a pilgrim should do, except for circumambulate the house until you have become pure. Again, into the two sahihs. Entering the mosque, some scholars have deemed it inappropriate for menstruating women or those in sexual impurity to stay in a mosque. I do not deem the mosque lawful for menstruating women, a woman, or a person in janaba, which means sexual impurity. However, another hadith states that in a state of major impurity, one can sit in the mosque after ablution. So, as I reported, I saw some companions of the Prophet staying in the mosque while in the state of janaba after performing the after performing the ablution for prayer. So, your wudu. Sheikh Fafan does say that anyone in major impurity can stay in the mosque once performing wudu, including menstruating women. It is one of the lesser opinions of Hanbali school of thought that do allow women to enter. And they say that the hadith that does prohibit the women is a da'if hadith. Others say passing through is permitted. So going through the mosque or walking through, it's fine. Staying there, it's not fine. So that's for those who are going through with sexual impurity. So that's your your prohibited acts, what you can do, what you can't do. So you can't, what you can't do is be sexually active. There's a disagreement on whether you can recite the Quran, touch the Quran. Obviously, you can't do itikaf, you cannot do tawaf, you cannot do any acts of ibadah, fasting and prayer as well. Okay. Ghusl, so go down to the final stage is where you now go and purify yourself. So again, when do you purify yourself? When the blood ceases, when you see a white liquid, or there is some dryness there. That is your indication of your menstruation, bleeding. If after this stage you bleed, you are to consider it as istiada and not menstruation. So intention is important, as mentioned in Sheikh Fawzan's book. He says to begin with the tasmiyah, washing the hands thrice, washing the prior pause, performing your full ablution, taking water. Obviously, knows a matter. We discussed that yesterday. There's a disagreement whether that is a fard or not. But with the hadith, there is a hadith there that the scholars say that if you, based on that hadith, it would be better. But if you did miss it or omit it by mistake, then you don't need to repeat it. But under normal circumstances, you should try and rinse your mouth and take water in your nose. Washing your head thrice, and that's mentioned in Bukhari. So if we go through Fiqh Sunnah, what does it say? It says more or less the same thing apart from the intention of tasmiyah. So washing of the hands, the private parts, and ablution, rubbing of your hair. So here you could instead of doing the in the wudu you do masah, which is basically you pass your hands over your head. But in the ghusl you actually rub your head quite vigorously, making sure all the roots are wet, and then you pour water on from your right side to your left, then to your left side. Bukhari just mentioned washing of hands twice or thrice. Then obviously going on to doing your wudu with the istinja, rubbing your hands, rinsing your mouth, and taking the water in your nose, face, starting with your right arm, and then obviously pouring 3 handfuls of water over your head. And this is where you can start doing, in the modern days now we want to do shampooing. So here is where you can put in the shampoo and start rubbing your head. And wash your hair in during the process of your wudu. Pour water over the body, 3 times, starting from your left. Please make sure that you are putting water behind your ears, any places where creases you are lifting, so lifting your breasts, make sure the water goes under there, and making sure that all the right side, front and back, is wet, your neck and everything, and then you turn onto the left side. So once you do the right side, make sure you are doing it up to a point in the middle, so the middle also gets included when you do the right, and then you do the left, so you've done both sides. And then withdraw from that place and wash your feet. You can either wash them during the ghusl, or after you finished your ghusl, after you finished your bath, then you retreat from that area and then wash your feet. And this is the sunnah of the Prophet. And he would not wash his feet in that area, he'd withdraw. So you can do that at the end or during your wudu. Okay, so delaying it is an option. Rinsing the mouth and taking water in the nose is a sunnah under the schools of Shafi and Malki. It is for under Hanafi and Hanbali, and as I said, it's based on a hadith that it's not in Bukhari or in Muslim, sorry. So it is, hadith that is not, the authenticity is not taken as serious as theirs, and as those two hadiths. So there is that difference of opinion. But what scholars have said, just to be on the safe side, with the hadith being a strong command of doing the gargling of the nose and the gargling of your nostrils, because it indicates that you should apply it, inshallah. Undoing your plait, so there is a bit of a disagreement here. What I find in Shaykaah book, and doing your hair is obligatory when you're cleansing after your menses and not after sexual impurity. Shaykaah said that hadith of Asma, when the Prophet ﷺ told her to rub her head 3 times, and mentions doing it as specified in this hadith. The one we've just talked about rubbing your head. Both Imam Malki and Shafi said undoing hair is not obligatory. Shaykh Ibn Abbas agrees with them. Imam Abu Hanbal says that it is not obligatory to inbraid hair as long as the roots are wet, and but it is better to undo it. But there is a disagreement, as I said, on braiding the hair. Now, just to add some clarification on this point, there is a hadith. When I will go into that, there's 2 hadiths. The first one is, it talks about basically when Aisha radiallahu anha, she was in a state of ihram, she was performing umrah and she got her menses. The Prophet ﷺ told her to postpone her umrah, and he said, undo and comb your hair and then assume ihram for hajj. And she did so. So here, what the scholars are saying, those who say that undoing the hair is a must, are referring to this hadith. Then those who say no, it is not a must, are referring to this hadith of Aisha. She said that Abdullah ibn Amr was telling a woman to undo the hair or the braids when performing ghusl. And she said, how strange that he should tell women to unbraid their hair during ghusl. And she said, why does he not just tell us to shave our head? She said, I used to bath with the Prophet in a single vessel, and I did nothing more than pouring water over my head 3 times. So you have 2 different hadiths here. Which one do you go for? So let's go back to the difference here. So here you've got Hanfi and Malki, and doing hair is not obligatory, and that's based on the second hadith of Aisha which we saw. Imam Ibn Hanbal says it is not obligatory as long as your roots are wet, but undoing it is better. What we're going to this opinion here, we are going to say undoing the hair is obligatory when cleansing after menses, but not after sexual impurity. So here you have the cases. This is after your menstruation. She was commanded to undo her hair after her menstruation. Here she's not commanded to undo her hair, and a woman came to the Prophet, there is another hadith, and she said, I have my braids tied up quite tightly, and I cannot always undo my hair when I'm taking a ghusl. And the Prophet ﷺ told her that she didn't have to undo her plaits. But again, scholars say this is only for sexual impurity. Why? Because you're more often going to be in a state of sexual impurity than you are in menstruation. Menstruation usually happens once a month, so you're not going to be faced with this challenge of undoing your hair. So this is a commandment for somebody who's finished her menstruation to undo her hair and wash them. But usually, because you are constantly probably sexually engaging or sexually active, on a regular basis, then undoing your hair is an inconvenience for you. So in that case, the Prophet ﷺ allowed women to leave their hair tied or plaited. Sorry. Okay, so that's the clarification, inshallah. Do have some case studies I will go through, inshallah, with you, because we do have, inshallah, time. I'm sure we do. Yes, alhamdulillah, we have time. So the first one is based on the mentioned hadith. If a woman sees blood in between two intervals of her menstruation, what should she do? So she's seen blood between her two menstruations. Okay, so what should she do? Anybody can give me an answer for this?
Assalamu alaikum.
Please raise your hand, sisters. Okay, I've got one hand raised. Okay, that's Aisha. Okay, I'll go straight to Aisha. But please, sisters, if you just raise your hand, then I'll come to you, inshallah. Just off my head. Yes, Aisha.
Assalamu
Excellent.
Based on what you just taught us, if it's between two cycles, then she should ignore it as istihada.
Okay, very good. Well done, mashallah. She should ignore it, yes. Okay. The second one, I'll come to you, Sister Mabina. A woman took a bath after menstruation, purified herself, but the same day she was purified, she notices blood. What should she do? On the same day, she's Sister Mabina.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykaah.
Walaikum salam.
The same day, according to, whatever you told, within 24 hours, after 24 hours, it will come in istihada. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it will be istihada. Why? Because istihada. Why? Because she's seen the sign of purification. She saw the sign of purification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you see the sign of purification, there's no length of time. As soon as you've seen your dryness, purified liquid, then you should ignore it. Inshallah. Yes.
Oh, okay, understood. Jazakallah.
Oh, yeah. Mashallah, very good. Okay, I'll just lower your hand. Yes. So Imam Shafi's is if it's less than 24 hours, Imam Shafi's opinion is if it's less than 24 hours, it is not to be taken as menstruation. Okay. But in Imam Malik is even if it's a spurt, it is. So yes, depending on which school you follow, but really, if you've seen the sign of purification, you've seen that white liquid or dryness, anything after that, remember the hadith of Atiyah. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you too much because that will spoil my next scenario. Okay, the person who has no menstruation for months and years, should she disregard any spotting of blood as istihada, irregular bleeding, or should she take it as menstruation? What should this person do? What would you advise somebody who comes to you and says, I have no idea about my menstruation? Your sister Aisha?
She should take the advice from what we've saw in previous slides and consider first 6 to 7 days as menstruation, and then the rest of the time she can just pray and fast as normal.
MashaAllah, very good, well done. Yeah, so she should take the case of the prevalent women. What is the case of the women around her? 6 to 7 days is normal, which is what's mentioned in the hadith, and then she should take the rest as istihada. Okay, so that she's someone who's perplexed. If a woman today begins spotting a week or days before the commencing of a menstruation, what should she do? So she sees brown spotting. She sees some brown spotting. What should she do? And she's not sure, is this a menstruation or not? So sometimes women start spotting, they get the brown spots, and then they get some discharge, whether it's peach color or whatever, and she gets it before her menstruation. What should she do? And she's not sure if she started or not. Yes, Sister Mabina.
If it's between menstruation period, general period, it comes under istiada, and she needs to ignore it.
She needs to ignore it, mashallah. Why? Based on the hadith of Atiyah. What did she say? We did not consider the marking between periods, the marking, the brown or the yellowish marks of any importance. We did not see that as any importance. So if you're somebody who is marking, days before or weeks before your menstruation, you need to ignore that, and you need to wait for the red to appear. If you are somebody who starts their menstruation like that, so it's part of your menstruation. So sometimes I know women can start their menstruation with brown. If it's part of your menstruation and you know it to be part of your menstruation, then you could take it as that. But if you're a perplexed case where you're not sure, ignore the marking, ignore the spotting, inshallah. Yes, Sister Labina, inshallah, I'll come to you now. We could go to answer questions. Yes,
In the
sister.
same question, if the sister period is regular, but for 2 days, starting 2 days, she just get little spotting, light spotting once in a day or twice. But after third day or fourth day, the bleeding will start on sanitary. First 2 days, nothing on sanitary, just she will see spotting just once or twice a day. In this case, she needs to stop those 2 days praying everything, or she need to wait till the bleeding on sanitary.
What do you think, sister? If we just mention
it's her period is regular, like every day, every month,
yeah.
the same thing happens.
Okay, so if it's this case, remember the hadith of Atiyah. So if a woman is, she's like Sister Mubina, she said the woman's going to start her period. So today is Tuesday today, right? So today is Tuesday. She starts spotting Tuesday, Wednesday, but her menstruation really, her date is Thursday. She starts on Thursday, but she spots 2 days before. Now, if this is not you mentioned her menstruation starts on Thursday, so this is considered outside of her menstruation. Yeah, is considered outside of menstruation, and it falls under the hadith of Atiyah, who said we did not consider any spotting before our menstruation of any importance. We ignored it. So as I said, if it's before your menstruation, then ignore it. But if it's included as part of your menstruation, so say you menstruate 7 days, but you first start with brown, dark brown, then the next day goes red, then and then it goes dark sort of dark red or black color, go dark, and then it's 7th day you finish. So that's part of your menstruation, okay, because it's included inside of your cycle. So it depends on you, because some sisters are spotting 2 to 3 days before the actual cycle starts. So we're talking about the actual cycle. If you are spotting for your actual cycle, then you ignore that. If the brown spotting is part of the actual cycle, and that's how you start, because I know women who start with peach color, start with a brown color, with a kind of that darkish brown, and then it goes to red, and then it goes to black, then it starts to reduce to red. So there's that stage of bleeding. So if it is part of your menstruation, then you take it as part of your menstruation. But as Sister Mabina says, if it's spotting before your menstruation, so you know that you mark before your actual menstruation starts, then you would ignore that. I hope that's clear, because say you menstruate 7 days, then you take that 7 days as menstruation, but nothing before that, unless it is part of your menstrual cycle, inshallah. Is there any more questions? Because we have finished our scenario. I know, Sister Aisha, you have your hand up. Yes, sister.
Yes, I have sort of a similar question as Sister Mubina. If somebody starts spotting or sees a sign of a little bit of bleeding, and then for next 1 or 2 days there is no bleeding, and then the 3rd day or 4th day of proper bleeding starts, but then this happens every month in the same order, and they know they are close to their cycle, so their cycle can be is due any day. So should they class that first day of that little bit of bleeding as the part of their menstruation, or should they just ignore it and wait till a proper bleeding starts where it's regular and throughout the day?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, sister. wait till your bleeding actually starts flowing, and you're seeing blood. That's your indication that your menstruation has started. If you are experiencing some marking and then breaks and then marking, and this is a normal occurrence before your cycle. So some sisters mark, and this is shaitan that's playing a trick on you. So here you need to continue praying. So any spotting you see, and especially if there's a break in between. But remember, menstruation is a continuous blood flow. Okay, unless you are experiencing any hormonal imbalances. But usually, as Sister Aisha said, you've marked, then you stopped, then you've started spotting again, and this is the normal cycle. Then you're familiar with your cycle. You ignore that until you see the real blood. Okay, until you see the red blood, then you start to count that as your menstruation. But anything else spotting, even if it's just before your menstrual cycle and it is spotting, and then especially if you have that break, that's a good indication that this is istihada. Okay, I hope that answers the question, sister.
That's fine. Sorry, one more question. You know, the ghusl, the ritual of the ghusl and the points and the steps that you showed in the slide. Of course, we don't take a ghusl with vessel anymore. Most people, they have showers, especially in UK. We have a bath, or we have a shower cubicle, and then you take a shower. But then I noticed the point that once you finish your ghusl, then in the end you wash your feet, and then you complete your ghusl. So in our situation, once we finished having a shower and we completed it, I mean, once we step out of the cubicle or the bath, should we wash our feet in the end again to kind of separate the two? Or is it because once you start taking a shower, the water is flowing from your head to your toes regardless? So should we kind of do it separately, or is it all part of the ghusl that you've done it completely now?
Okay, mashallah, that's a very good question, sister. Yeah, so moving away doesn't mean go leaving that place. So it just means move away from it. So say you are washing yourself, you're in this position, you just take 2 steps back and you can wash it there. And remember, with us, our water drains out. Okay, so it goes down that plug and outside, you know, through those pipes and out. So the water now flows out. So I think it doesn't really explain in the hadith, but most likely what it was not to keep that water, what's coming away in there, it was just a practice the Prophet ﷺ did. But scholars say you can wash your feet, you don't even need to step back. So it's just a sunnah to do it. You don't have to step back. But if you are sort of like in your shower, especially if you take it in a shower cubicle, or if it's a bathtub, then just move slightly back and then wash your feet. Or once you close the water, let the water drain, and then you could just wash your feet there. Again, it's just an option. It doesn't mean you have to do it. You don't need to leave the bath and to wash your feet. If you did, that's fine as well. You know, as long as you know, some opinions on you making sure the water is not dried off. I hope that answers questions, sister.
Yes, jazakallah khair.
What here? Okay, yeah. So it's an option. It's not something that you should do, but it's a practice of the Prophet ﷺ, just to move back. And also, it's just basically he did it at the end. Okay, so when he moved back, basically he completes his wudu, he delays washing the feet, he does his ghusl, the washing of the right to the left and rubbing of his head. Once he's completed his wudu and his ghusl, then right at the end he will wash his 2 feet. If he's delayed it, so you have the option of delaying it after your ghusl, or you can actually wash your feet while you are doing the wudu. Okay, so if you are doing your wudu, then you have the option of doing it in that time, or you could do it afterwards. But just if you wanted to follow the sunnah, just step slightly back from where you were standing and wash your feet there, inshallah. Any questions from Facebook or anything? Is there any questions, sisters? Any more questions? As I said, this is available for download on our website, so for you to keep. So that's why I've put all the evidence, all the hadiths together. I've explained in detail. Obviously, I've not read everything off the slides because when I tend to do that, I take too much time. So today I've tried to minimize it so we can have more, question and answer session, because I know this can be quite a confusing topic. But if there's no more questions, Aisha, then.
Yes, inshallah. I haven't received any questions from Facebook, so I think as sisters are happy to leave, then inshallah we can end the meeting.
All right, okay. Jazakallah. Akhir dana, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.